It is Sunday, October 9. This is Signs of the Southland 137. Me, Akshay, and Jake had a long homecoming weekend. And it may sound like that in our voices, but it is because we loved the weekend also for the most part. Jake, let's start with just some off campus stuff. Golf did some things, tennis did some things.
Yeah, golf and tennis both did things. I'm not going to say that all the golf things were good things, but they didn't come in last. And the field was pretty strong up there I guess, out there in Fort Worth. It's not really much of an up. Either way, at the other end of the Meridian Speedway, Tech faced off against a bevy of ACC Southern Tier US. I guess I'm trying to group these all together and kind of failing, but they did beat UGA, who finished in 15th. So at the end of the day, 12th out of 16 ain't horrible when you're also tied for 12th with the number one team in the country in the form of Oklahoma and finishing in front of Wake Forest and USC. So misery loves company, and Georgia Tech definitely was not alone in feeling the burn this week out in Fort Worth. Interestingly, roster-wise, there was no Ross Steelman, nor was there any Benjamin Ryder on the slate. Bartley Forrester led the way, tied for sixth at a -4. Everyone else kind of a tight week, but we'll keep our ears to the ground regarding Steelman and Ryder and see where they're at. But props to Bartley because he definitely led the way, and -4 is pretty pedestrian in terms of a top five, top six finish. So seems like it was a tough weekend for a lot of people, or a tough Tuesday for a lot of people out there in Texas. In other news, Bruce Hepler made it to the Georgia Golf Hall of Fame, and not just made it, but was also inducted. And that is well past deserved. One of the greatest coaches in the modern day in the sport. So great to see that well-deserved honor to him. In terms of tennis, Martin and McDaniel, Andres Martin, Marcus McDaniel, were out in Tulsa at ITA All-Americans. Martin and McDaniel as a pairing lost in the doubles round of 32. Andres played into the singles round of 32, and McDaniel, sorry, I've been saying that name for 4 years. I should know
Too
better.
many Broncos fans in the chat today.
Yeah, no kidding. But it's a miracle I can talk right now. I'm holding a mug of tea. I've got a cough drop, and I'm wearing blue light glasses. So that's the kind of weekend it was. McDaniel did get a couple singles wins, played into the round of 64, but also lost. So nothing too bad. Top 32, top 64 aren't bad places to be, especially early in the year. But pretty pedestrian. We also had women's tennis also in action at the ITA All-Americans as well. The women were in Cary, and I think they say Cary a little bit up in North Carolina, but I'm not a North Carolina boy, so don't come at me. Carol Lee did lose in consolation qualifiers to Julia Fleiner of Michigan, 7-6-6-0. So a little bit shorter list there, but it's early, it's the fall, and this doesn't really reflect on the team yet either. So yeah, that's as many words to say few things about tennis and golf, Jack.
The tennis stuff will start mattering much more in the spring, so we'll get there.
Sure.
We will get there when we get there. Swimming did some stuff. They swam at UNC Wilmington, both teams, and Campbell came to town, who we last played in baseball. The women's 1,000 free record fell in the midst of everything that was going on. Denise Ertan swam it in 9 minutes, 43 seconds, and 62 hundredths. The men and women both won on those meets. Granted, we're facing not ACC teams there, just in general. So
Can confirm that would get her the club swim men's record. So props to her for that.
Hey, there you go. Of note, Georgia Tech club swimming has been a powerhouse the last few years, to add some significance to that. And then in softball, there are just some exhibitions happening. South Carolina came to town on the 7th. They played 10 innings. I don't think they put anything on the website, Rambling Rex, so I haven't even bothered checking. They're going to Alabama for a doubleheader this weekend. They're hosting Bevel State, which we learned is a real thing. And then we're going to Dahlonega on October 23rd to play North Georgia. Maybe they'll do some gold panning while they're up there. And then soccer and hockey did things. The men beat Georgia on 3-0 on Friday. Was there anything big there, Jake, beyond that we just beat the team in Athens?
We beat the team from Athens in Atlanta, I believe. Friday night was a busy night for, I believe that that men's game was Friday night. But either way, busy weekend of soccer all around the flats because the women hosted Georgia State as well. I saw the announcement for that. I didn't catch any post-game posts. So, I presume they won because they're really good. And until I find out otherwise, I will continue to operate under that assumption because, our club soccer teams are both really good. And the ladies have really been good for a long time. So I think that's a safe bet.
And then in hockey, we lost 4-1. Connolly, though, got his 100th goal. So that's nice. I wish I had known that when I was talking to my hockey friend on the team earlier. But that's on me for not paying attention to this as well as I should have.
Shame on you, Jack, for running a Georgia Tech sports podcast and not knowing about a club hocky result. Shame.
Hey, I think that goes up there in the trophy accolades with, being really good at senior design as well because he had that volleyball project that would be great to do. But yes, we're not leading with volleyball next, which I think is a little bit of a surprise, isn't it?
If you had me making this outline in advance, I thought we would have been leading with this and going an hour and a half just on hopefully beating Pitt. But no, the football team has won 2 games in a row for the first time since 2018, pulling out a 23-20 win over Duke in overtime, one single overtime. That is, we didn't have to go to those crazy 2-point conversion stuff. We did have a 20-3 lead at one point, but everything seemed to be clicking decently well in the first half. Play calling wasn't. It felt normal. The punting team was punting properly. The only thing I'd have is David Shanahan was kicking the ball on such a line drive that we couldn't get good kick coverage at times, which definitely bit us in the second half. And as of now, if we win out, the Coastal runs through Atlanta, at least for the current moment in time. But it is the Coastal, so I'm not going to hold myself to that statement as of tomorrow.
Before we get too far down the road, as the guy who lives in like the history, first sense, blah, blah, numbers and stuff like that, I did want to walk something out. If you guys will go there with me. I know that the trope of Georgia Tech hasn't won 2 games in a row since 2018 is very well known at this point, right? It's in everyone's lead that has possibly written, thought, tweeted, podcasted about this since then. But do you guys remember what those 2 games were that got us?
Oh,
the first one was a night game. We were playing Miami. It was one where they like came out of the tunnel and started taunting the students and the band,
yes.
All that good stuff.
That was a whole thing.
That was their blackout too. Yeah, but the second game was a wacky game against Virginia that involved, of all things, Wanye Thomas running one back to the house. I think a safety at some point, and it ended on UVA just butterflying a kick wide, short, I don't remember what direction, in overtime. So I feel like that's a nice parallel to get us where we're at. I know we can talk about all the stats of, haven't won on homecoming since 2017. We haven't seen a lot of success in overtime, frankly, really in a number of years. I don't know that number off the top of my head, but in terms of kind of like cathartic release, I think it was very interesting, not only just to get the homecoming win in general, but for it to kind of line up that same way as the last time.
Yeah, what I was telling people afterwards is that this felt like the loudest, minus a volleyball game because O'Keefe's got its own sound stuff going in there, but the loudest any Tech game has felt at the end since the women's basketball game against UConn. It felt like it was like that level of like hype of like, holy crap, we might actually be here. This meant, you could tell that meant something. Games at the end feel different when they mean something.
The stadium was probably only half full, but the home sideline and the students, not only did the students show up, but they also stayed to there was 5,000 kids doing the horse.
No, I was very impressed. I was very impressed. This has been a thing about that I've complained about with people is like, no one stays anymore, but people stayed. Akshay,
I think I was telling someone that was with our group, I think it was a friend's girlfriend that went to a different school up in the Northeast. And obviously she's heard everything about like Tech not having good attendance because the team is bad. And the thesis is basically like, it's kind of the bit from Field of Dreams. Like if you build it, they will come, but it goes a little bit more than that, right? You have to put performances on the field that are worth staying for, regardless of what the result is. And this is a performance. I mean, we'll talk about some of the intricacies of calling it. It's complex, but it was a performance and a game worth staying for, and so the students stayed. It's
Yep.
as easy as that. It's entertain
That's
like
the big thing.
all of this is entertainment at the end of the day. You have to be
Yeah.
willing to put a good product on the stage, on the field, what have you, and that's what happened here.
Well, and there's a reason that during like COVID, men's basketball was basically selling out the very limited number of tickets for McCamish because that was a very compelling product. There's a reason that students are turning out for football. That's a very compelling product. Now, the thing is, whether or not you're a fan that's driving in from farther away, flying in from farther away, or just having, kids, life, cult, clubs, commitments, sports leagues, whatever, having to block that time out on a Saturday, I think that's almost a lagging indicator in terms of alumni and fan base type stuff. So Virginia might make that tough. Honestly, it's a little bit of a shame that that's a Thursday, even though I do like night games. I think it might be a little bit of a disservice just because it's Atlanta, and we may not have the biggest fan base, but it's certainly a pretty well dispersed one between San Fran, Austin, Dallas, Chicago, Northeast
Seattle,
corner,
We're
Seattle.
everywhere.
It's hard to come in for a Thursday night if you're in any of those places, or if you're in Birmingham or Macon,
Yeah. I think the kickoff time was a big help too. 4:00, just to get to live out the afternoon and have a good tailgate presence and like kind of live with the fan base. If it was a morning one, the first home game with Key, I think it just would have felt rushed into the game, but we all got to like live as a community in that feeling of having like, okay, this might go well. And then it went well.
Yeah. And that's something too. Like Rec Parade went like an hour in the morning. And I know not everyone who's back for homecoming always goes to that. People are tailgating, people are going to get brunch, people aren't in town yet, whatever. But like I've definitely seen noon games where there haven't been as many entries that thing flies down the street in 12 minutes and then it's over. But that was like a nice, pomp type, or not pomp, that's the wrong way to put it. A festive way to start the day, and that kind of bled into a tailgate, which bled into a game. And I wouldn't say it was a slow game, but it certainly wasn't all that fast either. At least my impression of it.
Three and change, I think. Yeah, it could have been faster depending how the rest of the second half went.
After the game, you're walking around Midtown, you're walking around West Midtown. Antico's was full, Rocky was full, people were out and about. And Cypress looked pretty full when I drove by. Like that was it was just a nice way to then transition back out into the day. So all in all, I think it was vibes wise a good weekend. And like you said, like that translates to a loud stadium. It translates to even though it's small, I'd say pretty engaged crowd as well. And I think that was kind of the theme, right? The team was locked in. The fans were locked in.
The vibes were great.
So
I was going to go to you so we could go to the not vibes.
I think the main remembrance that I have from this game, wow, remembrance is not the word I really wanted to use, but the main thing that I remember from this game is I said a couple of questionable things about refereeing, a referee, especially late on. I think both Jake and I did multiple times.
Not as much as the students, bud.
The students had something pretty vociferous to say about the previous regime, but I will leave that to unpack for another day. But there were some hilariously boneheaded calls that ended up keeping Duke alive on their final drive in regulation.
Yep.
It was a whole mess. One really bad roughing the passer call, one really bad defensive hands to the face call. And then I guess it gets salvaged by an OPI that moved Duke back in OT from, I think, around the 5-yard line back to.
No, it wasn't an OT. There was a DPI called on us in the end zone that got him to the 2-yard line.
Yeah, there was the DPI. So those three calls, if I remember, and I have the chart up.
I didn't see the hands to the face that well from where I was sitting. The roughing the passer, I think, was wrong. I could see why on replay, because it did kind of look like they had like the WWE drive him to the ground move that they're trying to get away from, and where you kind of like tackle to the side more. So I could see why they thought that, but it still felt like a clean play. Pass
I
interference,
mean,
I thought was legit, but that's just me. Jeff Sims, if you on pay just on like the basic stats, I think it definitely looks better than maybe what the eye test looked at. So give me your eye test versus numbers evaluation, just on the blanket level, the top put down level, and then we'll dive in a little bit further.
yeah, so we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, but obviously that audio has lost to the heat death of the universe at this point. But if you look at the basic stat line for Jeff Sims, it's 222 for 32, or 222 for 32, 228 for two TDs, a sack, um, eight, and then 15 carries for 96 rushing yards. None of this is particularly bad, right? Like, I mean, by all intents and purposes, going 10 yards per throw, yards per completion is pretty good. The problem is that based on his yards per play, he's throwing pretty shallow routes, and
Yeah.
um, that one sack was a killer. PF one of the best explanations of this phenomenon where the eye test is sort of like, oh, he might have had a really good day. Like the eye test and your basic stats are like, oh, he might have had a really good day, and then the numbers, the more advanced numbers say, oh, he had a very mediocre day, or at least like an above, slightly above average day. There's a chart by CFB numbers on Twitter that has the ESPN QBR on the x-axis and the PFF offense grade on the y-axis for all P5 quarterbacks. And if you look at where Jeff Sims is, his PFF grade is somewhere in the 80s, if I remember correctly, and his QBR is somewhere in the 40s.
So he's bottom left quadrant.
Bottom or top left quadrant.
Oh, top left.
Quadrant.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So the eye test, the way that, so context, the way that PFF works is they do charting, right? They look at plays and they grade quarterback play on a play-by-play basis, giving them a -2 to a +2 per play. So like a -2 is a very bad throw or interception or something like that. A +2 is a touchdown or like something spectacular, right? And then you can sort of make your way on the spectrum from there. But so he grades out very well on PFF, but he does not grade out very well on the advanced numbers. And I mean, that plays out in the numbers that we have too, right? In game on paper, his success rate was 48%. His EPA per play was 0.08. Like these are not bad numbers by any means. That 0.08 is 60th percentile, 59th, 53rd percentile, my bad. I realized that was three different numbers. And then that yards per drop back for him is in the 55th percentile. They're not bad. They're also not good. I still think if you're looking at that performance and saying like, hey, Jeff Sims has turned the corner, I think you are mistaken.
No,
I think he needs to clean up his act. Maybe it's not him that needs to clean up his act. Maybe the play calling needs to evolve a little bit, and we'll talk about that after I let Jake talk. But I don't see evidence there that he has turned the corner like I think a lot of us want to believe.
And I was going to say, just in terms of, it's like the same story. I feel like there's kind of times where he toes the line of doing things that almost implode spectacularly. I had somebody text me. I know he listens to these, so you know who you are. Shout out about how Jeff Sims looked amazing against Pitt, but he watched the condensed game, right? So that's all the stuff that's good, notable, the best, right? Oh, there was only one almost INT. Well, in actuality, there were five. And I think while maybe that number isn't as high this game, I still don't think it was, a Jeff Sims coming out party of, marching us up and down the field. Like there were times that we had sustained drives. That throw into Blackburn was a dime. Like that was electric. And I think a quarterback of lesser talent doesn't make that throw, but I still don't think that like absolves or says like,
no,
yes,
there was still some pretty standard Jeff Sims is having a hard time making this tough throw play here. There was one scramble play that almost ended up in a touchdown, but he was just so concerned with scrambling that he didn't realize that there's a wide open guy in the corner. Obviously, he had that one great throw and he had a nice long throw for one of the touchdowns as well. So he had his moments. He at least is getting, if you want to say there's a corner that was turned, I think we've unlocked maybe some because of how everything has changed now on this team. There's some potential that might be able to be used up well as we go back more to basics and just standard play calling, that he might be more successful in that sense. But I know this was there was no big leap made here tonight. I will say a good thing that we did have 59% third down success rate. Now, not necessarily when it mattered in the second half to keep drives going when we had those 3 and outs, but a big deal there. I forgot I think when we got the ball with 5 minutes left, that's when I had friends saying this is when Paul would have won us the game.
True. Just eating the clock out with the classic death march. But I think the Jeff Sims legs as a safety valve outlet type thing was definitely something that worked all night. And that's a decision-making thing that does give me at least a little bit more confidence. So I don't want it to just be, us or me dunking on him.
Yeah, that was all about the arm. That was all about the arm. The legs are a great part of it. We did get 2 plays of Zach Gibson in overtime because Sims went down. I haven't heard. I actually haven't looked. Do we know where he is? Is he fine? Do we get anything on this?
It looked like an ankle injury on the field.
I was hearing he would have been back for a second overtime after the game.
Okay, cool. So Zach went he went 1 of 2, I want to say. 1 of 2 had a 5-yard pass. But we got the field goal off. It was fine. I do want to talk about the second half play calling, Akshay, because I think we had a punt to end the first half, which people were kind of confused about. It seemed like a massive surrender index play. I kind of rationalized it as, okay, there's enough time to pin them to the back of the field and just prevent big plays, and we're fine. In the end,
oh boy,
I don't. But that's a stretch too. I'm like, that was me calling for a response. So I don't. What are we making up of this?
So I am pulling up the fourth down bot report on that right now. But there were 2 fourth. Before we get into like an in-depth discussion of play calling, I do want to talk about game management for a second, which is kind of similar. There were 2 fourth down discussions that were absolutely or decisions that were absolutely criminal in this game. There was the one that you're talking about, the 4th and 2 from the Duke 36. Let's see, the 4th down bot. It's AI 4th down or AI 4th on Twitter. The bot says go for it with a plus 4.5% win probability change if they were to go for it. So if they had gone for it and then succeeded, it would have been a 71% win probability afterward. If the kicking a field goal is 67, punting doesn't change anything. They ended up punting. So yeah, what ended up happening is they left 7.2 points of win probability on the field. They actually lost 7.2 points of win probability on that play itself for not going for it.
There was a lot of upside in going for that.
So the other decision, Jake, I know you want to talk about. I know you have something, but I want to make sure that I cover.
I'm about to carry a lot of water, so get it all out there before I start carrying the water.
Yeah, it's the other absolutely horrific decision here was kicking a field goal on 4th and goal from the 5. I'm loading up the bot report now, but if I remember correctly, this was it was a 3.1 difference between the 2 options. 3.1 win probability per point.
What was this? Difference. What was the score when we had that play? I'm forgetting.
This was tied. It's still scoreless.
Okay.
If they went for it, based on the expected value, if they went for it, the expected value, their win probability would have been 47%. If they had kicked the field goal, which they did, it would have been 44%. If they had succeeded on the attempt, it would have been 56%. So you're leaving so much value on the field by not going for it in these situations, and it's just very emblematic of the conservative play calling that we saw not only in that second half but just in general. And I'll talk about that more once I finally let Jake get in a word edgewise here.
Time to carry water for Brent Key. Love this man. Just gonna put this out here. This man has been a head coach for 12 days, like ever. I don't expect him to have perfect play calling management yet. This is worlds better than the regime that changed 12 days ago when I guess it's just the one guy. But everyone here knows what I'm talking about. This is something that I think you can't expect him to get right away as a relatively, well, not even relatively, just a green head coach. So conservative play calling as a first-time head coach for your alma mater on homecoming with a lot of emotions and a lot at stake, I don't really blame him there. That said, do I miss having just like that 7-minute death march it, triple option all the way down the field, seal the game, bring us home 20-3 or whatever? Like, yeah, that would be awesome.
Yeah,
But,
I think the biggest complaint I had was like we just left so much time on the play clock, regardless of what the play was called. Like there was just a lot of times where there was 20, 15 seconds on the clock. I'm like, all right, we could have bought a minute in play and just time just by taking care of that. So I don't know if that falls on Sims just not being able to just dump time or what if he was told to just run the play. But either way, that was where that was my biggest frustration on the play calling.
And we've got 12 days of sitting and grinding the tape or whatnot until their next out there. Game, yeah. And he had 12 days and had to coach 2 games in the meantime. I think we'll be.
So you're gonna say that our win against Virginia is gonna count for 2 wins by that math. Right?
I think it's a multiplier for each one in a row
so
that
4.
you've got.
Okay,
so we're at 4 because that was 2 in a row, and we'll actually be at 7 after the Virginia game since it's the 3rd in a row. So yeah.
I understand. I sorry to put a bow on it, but like I understand what you're saying about him being a relatively green coach, and we can toss the 4th down decisions because those are usually made by head coach and not by an offensive staff. But there is an entire offensive staff that has been there for X number of months, right? And that is making play calling decisions. And the entire second half, if we want to start unpacking that, was run for 1 yard on first down, run for 2 yards on second down, telegraph a throw, half of the time it fell incomplete, and punt. I have written about this fairly extensively the last couple of weeks. You should not be running on first or second down with that level of frequency that this team does. It is not optimal. It is not efficient. If I have the rate here, they ran on 54% of their early downs, their first or second downs. You are actively costing yourself field position, chances to win. It was working in the first half. Like there wasn't much that wasn't working in the first half. So part of me wonders if they got fooled into believing it'll keep working and that halftime adjustments don't exist somehow. And I agree. Like that's definitely like a valid conclusion to draw. Okay, well, let me back up. It is a possible conclusion to draw, especially because on the game as a whole, they were on those early down rushes. They were successful by EPA 50% of the time.
Yeah.
And in general, on rushing, their rushing performance was a 0.08 EPA per rush, which, if I have it in front of me, is a 60th percentile performance. Right? It's not bad. Like they didn't do poorly. I think the thing that I have an issue with is you are doing it so often that it just becomes very easy to game plan for.
Yeah.
Right. If you know that the first 2 downs are going to be rushes and you're not really using those opportunities to do play action or move the pocket to make a throw.
Yeah.
Or it's just very strange, especially knowing how much Chip Long relies on motion to create space in an opposing defense. It's just very weird for him to be so married to this idea of running the football all the time and establishing the run.
Yeah, and this was my same complaint with the Mike Smith era Falcons with Michael Turner. Every first down was just Michael Turner up the gut for 2 yards.
Dirk Cutter did this too. Dirk Cutter was the OC then, and he was also the OC for the last couple of years. But it's miserable.
It's not a fun way to watch football. If it works, it works. But you gotta really have some beef up front of the line and some speed to make it work.
I think the caveat there is that Paul technically ran this offense into the ground, ran this type of abstract type of offense all the time. Because that's how the flex bone works. It's running the football. All the time.
There was one flex bone play called. It went horribly, but it did come out. It made a cameo yesterday.
That's how the flex bone works.
You know that would not have flown under the old regime.
Nope.
Just straight up.
Nope.
That there's
Not
no
even a
way,
shot.
no way. Not with all that.
It's anti-branding.
Jake, Gavin Stewart watch.
Gavin Stewart watch. Love Gavin Stewart. Big Gavin Stewart podcast. In fact, this is the unofficial podcast of Gavin Stewart watching. 3 out of 3 field goals, 2 out of 2 extra points. I think after much gnashing of teeth, we might have a guy there. Yeah.
He kicks accurately. He's made some 40+ yarders. He basically won us last week's game. So yeah, I think I'll take this over Jude for any second. So
yeah, I will note that both of his field goals this week were from 22 and 23. When we're that close, I'd love to convert it, but it's nice to know that we can knock it back through the uprights. I think. And then a 37-yarder. So that was the overtime one.
Yeah,
obviously needed that. But I think that makes him 7 for 7 in field goals and 4 for 4 with extra points. So, just NFL teams. If you need a kicker, we got one now. So call us.
I think the critical piece there is that a noted individual is not running the special teams protection units.
Yes,
and so when you have actual adequate blocking schemes and an actual special teams coordinator to run those and train those blocking schemes, that helps out your
things tend to go much
specialists a lot.
I got a question for y'all. Are we gonna beat around the bush around the previous man's name for the rest of eternity on this podcast? Okay,
absolutely.
Just making sure. I'll throw it in the dustpan with B *** Lewis and the school in Athens. So good to know.
I prefer community college in Athens, but to each their own.
Nice farmland out there with some good breweries. Our next game is Thursday the 20th against Virginia at home at Bobby Dodd. We're going to take a short break by Jake reading something cool, I imagine.
Yeah. So as you all know, regular listeners, this is a Section 103 podcast. Love those guys. They've been a great supporter to us here at Signs of the Southland, and we love their merch. I kind of try and theme these into what I've seen, the news of the week, things like that. And today I saw so many Welcome to the Thriller Dome shirts, just so many. I think I might have said that last week. My favorite Section 103 shirt was the Hell of a Engineer one, but I think this one is my favorite one this week just because I love the Thriller Dome and it was so nice to be back there. For those who like performance wear, they've got a lot of that, a lot of great gold stuff there too. But my favorite gold shirt is Welcome to the Thriller Dome, and I cannot wait for men's basketball and women's basketball season. And we'll be back, of course, more on the Thriller Dome very shortly. But in the meantime, Steven did tease a new design on Twitter. And as always, free shipping over $70. You can find them at section103.com and at section103 on Twitter for some great tech content and the ability to interact and, select that next design. So go ahead and check them out.
Coming back, we are at not WBB. I'm reading initials and saying words. Women's basketball hired 4 new folks over the last couple of months. Becca Bornhorst, who is the Assistant Director of External Operations and our NIL liaison. Greg Callan, Director of Scouting and Video Ops. Kylie Smith, Director of Creative Content and Brand Manager. And then Lauren James, a graduate manager who was getting her Master's of Analytics at Georgia Tech. Akshay, you have some notes about some of these folks.
Yeah, so I put this on our shot sheet because I found 2 of these hires particularly interesting, and the other 2 interesting but decidedly less. Let's talk about Bornhorst first as the NIL liaison. That to me signals that Tech women's basketball is trying to get out ahead of the NIL situation, and NIL plays for their players. I think this is a really good opportunity and a really good market in which to take advantage of that. And they have someone that is going to help them organize those deals, get them set up with those deals. So it'll be really good for them to get that work in and get that work in an organized fashion. The other one that speaks to me as a noted analytics nerd is Lauren James, who's, like you said, is working in the Master's of Analytics program at Tech. as a graduate manager on the staff. I actually got pinged about this hire by a contact of mine in the analytics community, and he let me know that she was coming over. She has work on a resume from the 49ers and Pacers. She was, I believe, a two-time All-American at an NAIA school that I cannot remember the name of right now. But she's played ball. She knows numbers, or is learning more numbers, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how data is used to optimize certain facets of the women's basketball program. That contact of mine has done some work with other women's basketball programs in around the Southeast, so he knows a thing or two about how data is being applied there. So it's exciting for us to take advantage of a program-wide optimization, or a program-wide sort of program-wide benefit that I've been trying to get, that I've been campaigning Georgia Tech to take advantage of for a while. So that's interesting. Just to make sure I cover the other two, I think Kylie Smith's hire is mainly for socials and getting Georgia Tech's name and brand out there, much like the former regime had a brand manager hire for football. I think this will go over a little bit better, just especially with NIL and helping athletes, a smaller set of athletes, with their personal branding. And then Greg Callen brings a lot of video analysis expertise from USA Basketball and his time with the United Nations International School. So for scouting and for other video needs, especially for media purposes, I think that was one of the things mentioned in the release that will come in handy as well. I do want to note, all of these were done. All these deals and hires were made in August. If I read all of the releases correctly, I think the only one that didn't mention an actual start date was Callen's, but all of them should have been done in August. They were just announced now as women's basketball season starts to gear up. So it's not like, I would not take these as a sign that Frank Neville has come in and started making changes and pouring in investment already. This is investment that was already made in the program. This is budget that was already allocated to the program and that they are taking advantage of.
They all joined Caleb Courier, who came on staff in May of 2022 for director of recruiting ops. And then, I mean, on the NIL note, I mean, Nell has a basically kind of like how swimming is Turkish American. Women's basketball is Spanish American at this point. Nerea Hermosa, Inez Otiriol, and Aisha Wanarana are all Spanish. And then the rest of the team is mostly Georgian, with a few with people from other spots in the U.S. So, how we don't have any answers on how NIL will impact.
I kind of have an answer on that. They technically
do we know
can't
this?
Make
this
money.
This is news to me.
F1, if you're on an F1 visa, which I assume all international athletes are, you technically cannot make NIL money.
Right.
However, I will say that even if they can't, some of the branding stuff will help as they try to make their case for professional opportunities or stuff outside of basketball after they graduate. Right. It doesn't hurt to have some of that stuff set up for you. And at the end of the day, you're here both to play ball and get an education. So
doing it now would be great, and we'll preview these gals pretty soon. Season's coming up. That's sneaking up on us. That's we're about a month or so from the guys and gals tipping off.
We need to not forget about that. That's 2 weeks of content right there. Maybe bye week next week.
Bye week's a great time to do some basketball previews. I've been doing some research on the women's team for my writing, so I'm looking forward to it. We were talking about the hosts of McCamish. We had some visitors / hosts to McCamish today. The volleyball team had their first ever game in McCamish Pavilion. Their second in the building, technically. They played once when it was Alexander Memorial. This is the first since the remodel. Also, just by far the most people that have been to any volleyball game in Tech history. 3,418 people showed up today. It was a fantastic time. It was plenty loud enough. I was on they gave me the court. They gave media the courtside seats instead of up in the top rafters like they do for basketball. So I got to just feel all the energy, and I retweeted about it multiple times. Like it wasn't O'Keefe, and it's a different animal. It's not. I don't think the two should be compared directly. It felt incredible. The game lived up to the hype. Tech lost 3-1 to the number 5th ranked Pitt Panthers. today. They also beat Virginia Tech 3-0 on Friday in a normal game, so I'm not going to worry about much there. Jake,
The
from
VT game doesn't matter, or it was
no,
just UVA. It was not VT, by the
oh,
way.
UVA,
But
yeah.
yeah. So we had to pick one side of the Commonwealth Cup there. But I don't think anyone really
They
cared
both
about
wore
the
orange.
UVA game.
It's hard to remember.
No one really cared about the
Yeah.
UVA game. This was the draw of the weekend.
I mean, UVA has been the bottom of the conference for quite some time, and I feel very comfortable about saying that. And I'm not going to belabor any points from there. I was at the Mini 500 because the tricycle racing only happens once per year. So I wouldn't even have anything to say about it. One thing I do want to get in before we get, into the actual nitty gritty of the game, just because I don't want this to be lost to the sands of time. We did note that the previous high for attendance did come when Tech played at Alexander Memorial, but there was an interesting one to slip in there. I believe this is the program's overall high attendance, but I'm really shooting from the hip on this one. Tech did once pack about 24 to 2,500 into O'Keefe Gymnasium for clean old-fashioned hate. This was the 09 edition, and there were fans 4 or 5 deep along the baseline. So definitely not something I think you could do with our modern sense of fire safety. So this is about as big as we're going to get. And in terms of the atmosphere, I'd say it was pretty lively. Obviously, it's 2.5 or 2.75, whatever the number was, times the size of O'Keefe. And it's not a sellout of the basketball stadium, but the band playing straight down the court really helped. The number of people helped, and it's the Thriller Dome, man. All the sound bounces off the top of the tin roof, and then, or not tin, but off the metal roof and comes straight back down. So definitely, I think the home court advantage held true. It was just a very tight game all around. And I think even if it didn't reflect that in every set, it certainly felt that way as a observer.
I will say that the setup of McCamish was strange, right? You had the students on the usual basketball student section. You had the basketball student section along the court side.
But it was general admission. They put everyone everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, that was part of the problem. But so let's speak in more general terms then. Mostly students along what I would call the touchline in soccer, but like one of the courtside areas.
Definitely.
Athletes around the north. I think it was the north baseline, and then general admission the other way around, and then in the usual expanded student section with all the bleachers was the band, but only the band.
Yeah.
So at the end of the game, when the team is is clapping along to the fight song, they're just staring at just the band, despite students being on multiple sides of them. Making a general admission was interesting. I would have had, so if they do it again, which I do hope that they do, there are definitely some tweaks that can be made around the arena and organizing some of that just to make it more like student friendly, fan friendly. I don't really know.
Just to organize it. It just needs to get organized.
I got some erratum already. It was 3,200 versus FSU at Alexander Memorial, 2,000 versus UGA 3 times at O'Keefe. So I don't know. I didn't think it was that weird in terms of the setup. I think it made sense to put people in the better seats along the base or along the sidelines rather than the baseline. And I thought everything really carried over. And I don't know any way to prove this. So if somebody listening to this works for GT Athletics, or maybe we reach out to TJ or something like that, or coach, but it felt like the scoreboard was higher up than it normally was, and it felt brighter than it was.
I made this note on Twitter. I think it definitely was lower than for basketball. My guess is basketball height would have been too close to like the ball possibly touching it. It felt like it still kind of was within range, but my depth perception from the floor may have just been off, being too far directly.
No, it was high enough. It was high enough to avoid
and also it never looked like that was a problem. So the loss was Tech's second ACC loss of the season. Pitt and Louisville, the only ones to have not lost yet in ACC in conference play this year. They have both lost at some point this year, though. Tech is squarely the third best team right now in the ACC. They're 4-2. FSU, Wake Forest, NC State, and Syracuse all are 4-2 as well. But we only have 4 losses. Everyone else has 5 or more. So in that sense, we are squarely there.
And we are unique in both of those losses coming to Pitt and Louisville. So
Yes.
I think that our records are going to hold up when we start playing the rest of the conference. It's only really been a couple of weeks. So.
The pyramid holds up quite well. So we lost 3-1. That was our fourth loss of the season. Score 25-20, 27-25, 25-22, and then 25-16. The first set, our hitting wasn't great. I think Bergman, I mean, there was error. Bergman, I think it was one of those days where she just kind of had to take over out of necessity more than anything, I would say. She had 25 kills, 12 errors, hit 232. The team hit 154 though, and at one point was in the negatives in one of the sets. I want to say it was the fourth set. The first two sets were definitely close. I mean, Tech was in it the first set, and then Pitt just pulled away at the end. Second set, tight again. We got the 27-25, and we lost it. But I mean, there was no through those two sets. I could not tell of a better team in either sense. Well, because it's just a lot of this is timing, especially when it comes to getting to the right points first. And Tech played basically flawless volleyball in the third set, and they had 11 kills, I think, in that set. And Bergman went off; she got the 20 in that set. And then the fourth set, it all just came apart. Got the first point, and then 9-0 run for the Pitt Panthers, and that just about did it. There was just no coming back. There was some questionable refereeing calls, notably in that fourth set, that I maybe didn't change the outcome of the match, but at the very least felt like a dagger into the momentum that just kind of gave it an extra oomph that it did not deserve in terms of what was actually happening on the court. That was my field. Tech got 2 yellow cards today, so like we weren't happy either.
Part of the thing that had me off, and I think Akshay, you and I may have alluded to this in the moment, but just the difference, not only in angle, because we were a little bit out towards the corner of the court. Obviously, that's not an angle that exists at O'Keefe, but also the shallowness that the seats rise at. Like I was just seeing balls at a relatively new angle for somebody who watches most of his live volleyball in O'Keefe, and most of his, recorded volleyball from that same kind of high TV angle. So it was definitely an interesting perspective, fan wise out there. And I think that changes kind of how you perceive maybe the same calls or no calls versus a regular game.
Yeah. Also, the depth perception is definitely screwed up from that angle, because we're used, like you said, we're used to watching volleyball at O'Keefe, where effectively the whole student section, or the whole section that we usually sit in, is perpendicular to the net, right? So it's a lot easier.
We all got to turn 90-ish degrees somewhere getting there today.
Probably at 60, but 60. It makes it super hard to judge, especially when we were sitting with a friend of ours that played club volleyball at Tech. So he was able to walk us through some of the strategy. And he was mentioning, hey, this drop shot that they're trying to get to feather into the short corner or the near corner of Pitt's court, or part of the court, like, hey, that looks like it's going out, but every time that Pitt moves to triple block a player, that spot is always open to get to dump the ball into. And so you're able to see like things like that we might take for granted if we're looking at it perpendicular. Are very difficult to ascertain from that angle and where we're sitting specifically.
Yeah.
And it's also it also helps to have kind of that experienced volleyball aspect from somebody who has followed the team a lot. It's part of the reason that I think, having some of the ACC commentators, I couldn't name some of the opposing ones off the top of my head, but certainly Keely Eveland, just somebody who's been around the sport a really long time, quite frankly, is Tech biased enough to, obviously calls a very fair game on the radio, but in terms of like that was a net violation. Like I'm a Tech fan, but like this is why. Like because as more of a noob, I think it's or a newbie to the sport, or at least just somebody who's a little greener and hasn't played the game. It's sometimes easy, and I think this could be applied to baseball, football, basketball as well, to just be like, like. That looks like a lot of other stuff I saw, but like the nuance to catch that is something that comes when the game slows down. And in terms of the game playing fast, I think it probably arguably could be said that it was being is a pretty fast game on the court as well. Pitt's a really good team. They were having a lot of success up the middle, and I think our attack just wasn't there today, and we seem to be playing a decent amount. I don't want to say out of system per se, but just that they say baseball is a game of inches or a game of degrees, right? This is the exact same, right? You're a tenth of a degree down versus whatever it hits the hand, on the knuckle versus on the palm. That just it completely changes the game.
It's a mixture of stuff. I think especially in the fourth set, we couldn't just square a ball up at all. Like we couldn't set ourselves up well. The fourth set, we set ourselves up well. We have the Paolo Pimentel problem again of return errors and just not being able to get digs at certain spots. Which I mean, there's not really a way to replace her. We kind of tried. The thing we did replace today was Tamara Otene, who was not producing offensively at all on the outside. And then I guess I wasn't really tracking her defensively, but it was enough to where she just did not play the third and fourth sets and the end of the second one as well. And Leah Harper got a lot of points. Elizabeth Patterson got a lot of points. Nicole Drunick got some points in. And so Talia Marmon made an appearance as well and got an assist out of the game. So I was actually, and Laura Fisher came in as well. I was very impressed with Leah Harper today. She had some effective kills. She operated well on the block. There was one point at the end where we took out Pimentel, and it was the starters minus Otene and Pimentel, and it was both Moss and Morissette were in there with Leah Harper. So it kind of went for a tall lineup, and I think an all defensive lineup as well to just set up Julia. Pitt did a very good job of just targeting Julia on attacks to get her out of points as well. That's either serving to her, getting her on the floor, doing whatever they could to just not make her effective. She still had her 25 kills, so I think she still got her say, but they did well in that strategy. Yes, Akshay.
What I would say there is, like, I think teams have been really harping on making sure that they triple block Julia Bergman, and then on top of that, because teams have known to target Pimentel on serves, you're seeing Bertolino and Bergman come over to cover
that was a common thing
Pimentel on serve reception, and that leaves them, sort of scrambling when trying to set up an offense and set up an attack.
Yeah.
So
there was only a couple. There wasn't that many triple blocks on Julia when they were telegraphed. Oh boy, did they send three? They could send three. But it was mostly double, and she had 12 errors, so it worked to an extent.
I want to say Harper and Fisher definitely. I thought they had good looks and kind of. I thought that for a couple of weeks. I know we kind of talked about this like two episodes ago, but obviously this is the most time I think we've seen out of either of them on the year. I will say, I think it was interesting, kind of tying into the Pimentel question, tying into the Otene question, having to have Pimentel and Patterson out on the floor at the same time is a lot of defensive specialist libero type space on the court. Two year six players are there instead of having maybe that third outside hitter that we usually see the Otene, Bertolino, Bergman type lineup. And on a day like today, or maybe I would argue that this is something we've seen all year. And maybe it's just because they're middle blockers and this kind of happens to the middles sometimes. But I would love to see more opportunities to get more Morissette and more Moss in the game, because I think that was a look that really worked for us today in a way that, obviously with Otene coming out of the game, she was a little bit off her game, but even it seemed like Bertolino was just a little bit hesitant or just a little bit up when you could be playing a little more flat or down and just putting things that Pitt could really, frankly, get to. And the reason we had to go to Bergman so much was, to put a point away and get the point across. Obviously Bergman is ruthlessly effective when she clicks on those, but I just didn't think we saw the same thing from anyone at outside hitter there. And that's what makes me go, hey, how do we get Morissette and Moss in there? They're proven and experienced at this point.
I would say like some of that comes down to setting too. And this is something that we saw the color commentator comment on a lot versus Louisville. Like the setting also has to improve, and it has to be at a point where like the football version of this would be high pointing, but your outside blocker is getting high enough to absolutely slam that ball into the ground and make sure it doesn't hit anyone
Yep.
else on the opponent. Right. And you saw Pitt do actually a really good job of this. They ran
Yep.
basically the same play 5 or 6 times where they received a serve, passed it to the setter, and then the setter set it up high enough for their number 20 to just slam it down in the middle of Tech's defense. And so
They killed us on that the whole way. And there was some easy serves that we gave them, and when we gave them an easy serve, oh my god, did they just
right.
shred
Right.
out.
And so it's incumbent on Tech to figure out how to one negate that advantage and negate that advantage both from the serve side, right? Not giving them a lob serve. I think you mentioned that in the chat, like not giving them lob serves to work with. And two, not allowing that kind of hole to show up in your defense where you can just be like, okay, I'm going to slam it and I'm going to put it right at the center, like the center of all 6 people on the court, right?
Yeah, on the Morissette Moss part, Morissette was our most effective hitter by far. She was 7 of 8 at one point, and then she ended up going 8 for 13, no errors, so a 6.15 hitting percentage. Moss had 7 kills. She also had 4 errors today, so it wasn't her best day. That's the part. That was what I was like. We did really good about that on Friday of spreading the load and just not banking on Bergman, keeping everyone honest with Bergman, but using everyone else to be like, hey, we got 5 people that can lay down a great kill at any one moment. Which one is it going to be? I'm not experienced enough to like know how to technically formulate that or get us to that point. But I think this was the match where it could have worked better. Something could have been done there. That's my thought.
And that's something that makes me wonder if it's just like a outside hitter is a very like flashy position type thing. Cause like Morissette has very under the radar been just ruthlessly efficient from service, from blocking, from, the attack. Like I just, number 11 is, a number 1, number 2, number 3 option regularly every night. And I think it's something that kind of stands out more when you see just how well Pitt was able to feed their middles, and we had just no answer. They were phenomenal up the middle.
I need usage rate stats for volleyball. Sometimes we get them sometimes they give us these for basketball games if they're tracking them. They don't do that every game, but I'd be thrilled to just see just something about where in a point someone's touching the ball and what the results are. Just basic stuff like that.
Vox needs to pay us to hire an intern to chart these games. I'm just saying.
Vox, we can do some good work. All right, that's. Anyone else have anything here for volleyball? I mean, it was even though it was a loss, it was a great day. Don't get us wrong on that. We had a lovely time. This was also a pretty important test run in the theoretical situation where Tech makes it past the second round of the NCAA volleyball tournament, where O'Keefe is not a permitted venue because it's too small. We can use it for the first and second round. So I think this was also a big learning, just for the team as a whole and all the staff, just to like learn how to operate this.
And this is something that was not possible before the weirdly fortuitous note of the water damage basketball court. I think I can't remember how old one was, but I don't think it was particularly old unless they redid it.
Well, it was definitely replaced, but I mean, it was replaced twice in the last 3 years at least because of when they announced Tech Gold in 2018, it had that weird greenish tinge, and then they replaced. I didn't know if that was a completely new floor or just a sanded down and repainted kind of thing. Because I think you can get 3 or 4 sandings. I can't remember. I asked my middle school gym teacher one time how they did that, and he's like, "Before we have to redo the whole thing, we sand it down 4 times." Maybe that's just because it's a cheap middle school. Maybe he's completely wrong. I don't know. But there you go. Illinois middle school gym maintenance coming in handy there. But no, this wouldn't have been possible without the fortuitous water damage and putting those holes in the floor. This is a trope that over 137 episodes, Akshay and I have worn down to bits, and it's wild that it finally happened when it did. So, and we'll get Pitt and Louisville, at least one of them every year, even if we don't catch them both twice home and home. So maybe this is a sign pointing to an annual thing too. I think that would be, great homecoming feature. We will. And it's not like this denigrates or devalues the O'Keefe experience, right? Like this is a completely think Jack, you said it early on. Like this is a completely different experience with completely different expectations from what you get in the bandbox of O'Keefe. O'Keefe is loud because it's a tissue box. It is a literal bandbox. It's a matchstick box.
Yeah.
Right.
And
But this is loud because 13 or what it was at 3,400 people.
This was loud because 3,400 people decided to be loud today.
And see, that's the thing too about that 3,400 number. That's a little bit deceiving, I think, because you can say, oh, that's 3 times as many people fit in O'Keefe. With O'Keefe, all 3 of us are guilty of this. We are 3 of the 1,200 a lot, right? You're getting 1,200 people in there. You're selling out, but a lot of those fans are super loyal, right? They're season ticket holders, they're students, they're in the band, their parents. This is, that's like 2,000 people who either don't catch a volleyball game very much, or, maybe it's their first. And that's a pretty important way to kind of get that brand out there and get the interest there. And that it builds the program and it builds interest.
Yep. Shout out to my new friend, Jack Pools, who sits next to me in O'Keefe. He's a nice guy. The next game will be this coming Wednesday. We're playing Clemson in O'Keefe, 8:00. So the odd Thursday or Wednesday game, not our usual Friday, Sunday slate. So that is what is coming up. Let's shift over to back to the gridiron. Some ACC picks. It's a light week this week, only 4 games, so some bye weeks happening, including for the white and gold. Is starting. The ACC slate starts 12:30 on Saturday. Miami and Virginia Tech in Blacksburg. Akshay, what do we got here?
Miami favored by 7.5. Virginia Tech is completely out of sorts. Miami should win this one pretty handily.
Virginia Tech is terrible. Give me Miami.
I will take Miami as well. The best game on this slate is at 3:30. This is on ACC Network and not that's bad. This is on ACC Network.
Technically a national broadcast. Don't let it get twisted. It's technically a national broadcast.
It's technically a national broadcast of the 18th ranked Syracuse hosting the 15th ranked North Carolina State. 1 loss between them. I don't know if this has ever happened this late in the season between these guys. I am going to take the orange here. Who are you taking, Jake?
This is a bowl eligibility bowl. I think Syracuse does it. I think as much as I kind of feel for NC State fans being snake bitten, it's their house. There's a lot on the line to go 6-0 bowl eligible and stay undefeated. Syracuse.
Excuse me, it's their dome. It's their JMA wireless
controls
dome.
Their own destiny in the ACC Atlantic halfway through the year. Syracuse.
That's big.
They
that's
still
big.
They still have to
just like us. We control our destiny too, for the record. See you in Charlotte, Orange.
So we'll see how that shakes out, because I think we'll talk about Clemson in a bit. But Syracuse favored by 5 here. I think this one ends up close. It kind of depends on Devin Leary's health for NC State. We'll get an update on his health later this week, I believe. If he's healthy, I think Syracuse wins, but NC State covers 5.
Okay. Clemson, we're on Clemson now. 7:30 ABC game in Doak Campbell. Clemson's visiting Florida State, who is 2-2 ACC play. Clemson, Clemson and Syracuse are the ones that are owning the Atlantic right now in terms of controlling their destiny. Clemson's a 4-point favorite. I'm taking the Tigers. Where are you taking, Akshay?
It's Clemson, and it's Clemson. I don't know how this spread is 4 points, but I guess Florida State's getting 2.5 at least for home field.
Something, yeah.
Clem.
Wallace Wade Stadium, 8:00, ACC Network, North Carolina against Duke. 2 days ago, I would have said this was going to be a juggernaut, because who knew if the Coastal went through Duke, but now I will not say that, because this game might not mean anything in the end here. I'm still going to take Duke. They're a 6-point favorite at home, and North Carolina's only got 1 loss, but
UNC is the favorite by 6.
Oh, I read that wrong. Never mind. I'm still taking Duke. I got some Duke friends.
There is no freaking way that the least expensive ticket for this game is $64 at Wallace Wade Stadium Mausoleum.
That's before wine and cheese.
But I mean, maybe they sell it out because you can literally walk from Chapel Hill to Durham. But I'm not convinced that either of these teams are all that good. That said, just on a hope and a prayer, I'm going to take Duke to get us a little bit further out in the driver's seat for the Coastal.
That's some Tar Heels. Tar Heels inflating the prices here is my guess.
probably. I think a Duke. It's either a Duke win or a Duke win in this game, or a UNC loss when UNC and Tech play means that Tech controls its own destiny. I will once again warn you not to get on that narcotic of Tech winning the Coastal. Don't think about it. Hope is bad. However, in terms of this game, UNC is fraudulent. Duke also potentially fraudulent. I think the situation here will probably end up being UNC covering this 6-point spread, just because that offense is too dynamic to get held down by at best Duke defense.
Rebellions are built on hope, Akshay.
I refuse to watch that much Star Wars anymore.
Nerds.
Sicko picks of the week. I am taking Cal covering when they play Colorado, because you just beating Colorado seems easy enough, and I don't know why I would ever watch that game. So I think that's in the right category then. Jake,
that got relegated to Pac-12 Network, didn't it?
Probably.
Are they making the nation watch that? Now I have to go check.
If a game falls on Pac-12 Network, does it really?
Pac-12 Network. Happen? It is a 11 a.m. start. This is 2 p.m. Eastern time. They're playing this game in the morning in Boulder at Folsom Field.
Well, it is on Pac-12 Network, so there might be more people in the stadium than are watching it on TV. So
correct.
All right, I'll do my pick next. Welcome everyone, welcome one and all. Run up that hill, because we are in the upside down. I cannot plug ranked Illinois here. Ranked Illinois fighting Illini 5-1 versus Minnesota, but instead I will tell you to put all of your money on number 19 Kansas, who are favored by 6.5. Are they favored by 6? Really? No, they're plus 6.5. There we go.
Yeah, underdogs.
There we go. Underdog number 19 Kansas can't get no respect. I think they pull out the win outright.
I am amazed that OU is still getting points after getting skunked last week in Red River. I am also very sad to report that I was wrong in picking OU for Red River last week, but we can move steadily past that. This week, Nebraska is a 11.5-point dog at Purdue, if I remember my chart correctly here. Purdue, unknown how good they are, but I don't think they're 11 points better than Nebraska. So I think Nebraska covers 11 here. It's going to be a weird game for both of these teams. One of them is on an interim. One of them has a coach potentially on the hot seat. Just a very, very weird vibe for a 7:30 kick on Big Ten Network.
The 3:30 slate this week is elite. Bama, Tennessee, Oklahoma State, TCU, North Carolina State, Syracuse. Going to be some good football this weekend. That is all I believe we have. I'm watching the NL's wild card right now, and Joe Musgrove is getting thoroughly investigated for some sort of sticky substance on his ears and his glove. This meeting's been going on for 2 minutes, and I cannot wait to turn the sound on. So, Jake, please take us home.
Yes, sir. As always, you can find us, Scions of the Southland, wherever fine podcasts are distributed. You can find the articles associated with this, as well as everything else we produce at FromTheRumbleSeat.com. We got a great team over there, and of working with all of them. This includes things like the Binion Index, college football's Binionist Index. You can also find work that we do in other places. Robert writes for Football Outsiders once a week, and Akshay puts out GameOnPaper.com, the best place to find football advanced stats. You can comment on articles on the site. You can email us at fromtherumbleseat@gmail.com, and you can tweet at us at FTRS blog. We really do love all that feedback you give us, and always love to hear and incorporate that into what we write and what we say here. You can find me at Jake Grant 98 and Jack at Jack Nicholas on Twitter. Once more, we love Section 103. We are going to go wear Section 103 things to bed, or maybe that's just me, and you can find them at section103.com and at section 103 on Twitter. For Jack and Akshay and the rest of the gang here at FTRS blog, we thank you for listening. Good night, happy homecoming, and go Jackets.